Hello, everyone. It is nice to be with all of you today. I just like to welcome all of you to the yet another episode of From Ordinary to Extraordinary. And I'm thrilled to welcome my guest today. We have with us Lilli Graf, founder of IMMA Collective. I will just give a quick introduction about Lilli at this point. So, Lilli, first of all, thank you for taking time and joining me in this session. So, today we welcome an extraordinary leader in climate resilience, social impact, sustainability, Lilli Graf, from a remote mountain farm in Italian Alps to shaping innovation at various organizations like Barclays, Google, Vodafone, Lufthansa, UK government. Lilli has spent a number of years leading transformation, a service design expert with a master's in service design from Politecnico di Milano. She has taught in various organizations like SUPC, Politecnico di Milano, and a speaker at various global conferences. As the founder of IMMA Collective, Lilli empowers solopreneurs and independents in climate sustainability and bringing impact, fostering resilience through collaboration. Consults for various organizations like Zolando, Oatly, Financial Resilience Institute to drive sustainable change. A true innovator in adaptive leadership, innovation management, system thinking, Lilli is here to share her insights on navigating the future with purpose and resilience. Let us listen to Lilli. Lilli, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Phoebe.
So, Lilli, I just like to inform my audience that we interacted through NEOL. NEOL is a platform for talent in the design, sustainability, and climate change, and different other aspects. And that is the platform through which I interacted with Lilli. So, Lilli, for our audience, if you can share your current line of work, that will be very helpful.
Yeah. So essentially, my work really answers the question, how can we prepare for climate breakdown? Which is a very uncomfortable question. It's like, what are you focusing on? And actually, how that turned out for me was actually bringing people together to build resilience. And I started focusing on this type of work, and I had various conversations with clients that I had. And the question that came up over and over again was, what can I personally do to become resilient, to prepare myself for the future? And so I started looking at all aspects of life, where you live, what you do for work, your family, your community, your finances. And I found that probably how you make a living is one of the things that has the biggest impact. And if we are working for ourselves, we have more flexibility in choosing what we do, how we do it, and when we do it. And so I thought that's very interesting. So actually working for yourself is one of the most resilient options, but we often perceive it as one of the most uncertain options. And so I thought, yes, of course, because if you do it alone, you're like a tree exposed to all the winds and weathers. Yes, you get your resilient, but it's probably not much fun. And so I thought, what if we would actually come together? All the people that work for themselves to be more like a forest that is connected through these roots and where we share connections, resources, and support. And that actually led me to starting IMMA Collective, which brings together independents in the climate and social impact space to essentially build that forest. And then I also still do consulting at the side. And I can see that many organizations come to me to help them design how they bring people together. So it can be from kind of local civil protection that works on disasters and extreme weather events, and they realize we actually need to get people together, or other organizations like, for example, the Fashion Pact, where different leaders in sustainability and in fashion are trying to kind of come together to drive the agenda. And so I really specialize more on understanding what can be the quality of those connections and how can you design them intentionally.
Thank you. Now, that make me curious. What was your first journey like? Like, some of our audience are students, and some of them are, sometimes in a transition stage into a new career option, or sometimes people are curious. What can I do differently? People want to see their purpose, and um, I just like to understand. Can you take us back to the early days of your career? And what was your professional experience like, and how it shaped your ambitions and your choices?
Yeah. I think then I need to take you back where I grew up. I grew up on this remote mountain farm. And so, because we worked in the fields, like for us, like I started working very early on. And sometimes that just meant kind of bringing water to the other people that were like working under the heat. And for me, that also just kind of, I remembered in the free time that we have working on the fields, we would actually climb a tree and play office there and pass literally kind of leaves from one branch to the next. And so that maybe was, but what I learned from that experience was often that in nature you can't just say like I want to do this or not. Maybe I wanted to be at the swimming pool that day, but you can't. You just need to work. And so I think I would just work up with a work ethic in which I learned how to enjoy things that other people might not enjoy. and
Mm.
and also I think because I came from that mountain farm, we to some extent needed to work very early on and make my own money. So I think my first paid job, I had that when I was 12, and it was essentially filling up the shelves in the supermarket of like the local shop. And I was very timid and I was shy, and it was just kind of in the back office and doing basic things. But I think that gave me just early exposure to what it means to work to be able to get some money, and how also like you can find sometimes meaning in the even most simplest things.
Mm. Mm. So, you mentioned about being in a shop, and like, so was there any specific thought process which might have di- led you to take a bachelor's in a specific field after your high school? What was some of the thought process at that point of time?
I think actually now that you make me reflect on this, I was going to like my schools, or the region where I woke up, we all spoke German, and I went to German school. And then immediately after university, I decided to actually go and study at an Italian university. So completely switch language. And I think if I probably wouldn't have had exposure to things that are uncomfortable, I might not have taken that step or put myself out there, or because my parents educated me to independence, moving in a completely different city with a different language and a different culture to kind of start again. And also I had the luck that my parents always gave me as a compass: do what you love. It
Mm.
like that was the kind of the north kind of star. You need to kind of find out what you love doing, and that's what you should aim for. And so I think if I look at my career, sometimes I had quite a lot of transitions and changes. And I think a lot of the professions that I took on didn't exist at the time. But I was able to take them because maybe my compass was always saying, do what you enjoy and maybe create your own work.
Mm. Mm. So, I'm just curious. So you are uh, right now in Italy, in a German-speaking part of that space, and you mentioned you shifted to an Italian university. What were some of the struggles, and what were some of the learnings at that point, which might have influenced you? And again, audience members, some of you are there. Thank you for joining. And in case you have a question to be raised, please, those who are in LinkedIn or in YouTube, please share that in LinkedIn. If we are able to respond, we will respond it. Otherwise, we will get back to you later. So thanks again for joining. So Lily, if you can share that part with respect to moving from a German speaking to an Italian speaking region? Because
Yeah.
maybe audience may not understand that context well. So that may be something, if you can a bit more
Yeah.
in detail, that will be helpful.
Yeah. So I think I was at the decision. It's like, okay, should I study chemistry at a kind of in Austria or at the German university, or somehow I couldn't decide. And I thought generally math or anything I was good at, but I thought that 1 and 1 is always 2. It doesn't change. Whilst when you put one person and another person together, you never know what happens. And so I found actually the kind of the human aspect much more interesting. And so I ended up actually choosing an Italian university and to study kind of organizational development and adult education, because I really wanted to think about how can I work in human resources? How can I help people develop and grow? That was for me a kind of very interesting topic. And so I ended up at this university where suddenly everything was in Italian, whilst I studied things before, like Italian for like where I grew up is considered like a foreign language. It's like for other people who teach like English and you just learn the basics at school. And I decided, okay, let me start this. And what also happened is at the same time, the first year I found a flat where I only had people from England. So I had like English at home, Italian at university. It was very hard at the beginning because I had no clue. And I had this wonderful friend, Fabiola. She was from Sicily. And she also, when she was 16, she moved to the city Verona. And so she knew what it meant to leave your home and be somewhere. And in that initial phase, she always invited me Sunday for lunch and to spend time with her family. And it was amazing to have somebody who actually kind of takes you a bit in and makes you part of your family and makes you feel at home in a place that you don't feel at home. And so for me, it was interesting because it took me a while to kind of get used to it. It was very hard. And then 3 years later, I kind of took the first chance to go and do like in Europe, we have this concept of Erasmus, where you can go and study at another university in another language for a certain period of time. And I then decided, okay, let me go to Belgium and study at a French university for 6 months and learn French from scratch. So I think it then gives you, when you do hard things, you start gaining confidence. And every time you take a bigger leap.
I'm just curious. So I understand that dynamics which you have experienced, and you highlighted that learning in that process, being out away from the home in a different languages. So what was the breakthrough to the first job, like which is after your studies in university? What was it like?
Yeah. I actually started working whilst I was at the university, in the sense that I always needed to kind of to be financially kind of self-sufficient. I needed to work, so I had many different jobs. It goes from being a tourist guide to being a model to working at trade shows. Like I had so many jobs, and
Okay.
and what then happened is that I started working for an innovation agency of the Chamber of Commerce as an intern. And we really went on. It was a great time. And then as I said, I went to Brussels or like to Belgium for 6 months. And so I came back and I just started my master's degree. And one evening I was at the theater, and outside I met this old work colleague and said, "What? You're back. We're actually looking for a new intern. So are you interested?" And I said, yes, because I was in Brussels, and the university there is so much more concrete, and I didn't want to go back to kind of theoretical things. So I started working for them as an intern, like as a paid internship. And then 4 months later, they decided to open a new office, and they needed somebody who spoke different languages. And they said, Lilli, you know different languages. Do you want to take this on? We hire an external consultant, and you can essentially become responsible for writing European grant applications, so innovation projects that needed funding from the European Union. And we were very lucky because some got approved. So I ended up actually kind of needing to kind of manage an office that was very new, and while still studying like full time and also working. So that was a very intense time. I think if I look back, I definitely had a burnout and lots of like health issues because I was just taking on too much. But I just thought that, let me experiment. What are my limits? Like how much can I push myself or not push myself? So I'm not proud of that, but like I felt like it got me to a point where I thought I had so many issues with dry eyes that I thought I could never work in an office again. So I think I'm smiling now, but it was a very hard time also to kind of manage two things and even question, can I even do this work again?
So if I ask, what was some of that learning, which which might have helped you as you progress over the years?
I think often I think I was a typical person like young people are, that are impatient. And I think we just don't have time, but actually we have time. And I think I just wanted to get everything done or like be on that timeline. But it was fine. At a certain point, it was fine. I was like kind of said, yes, let me, like I did all the exam, let me pause with the university and just focus on this job right now. So I think that's the learning. And also right now I'm more aware of that self-awareness that you need to have of your body, of what it needs. I think sometimes we can be very much in our mind and say, this is what I need to do, but what does your body say? Like, I think we often don't have a good mind and body connection. At least that's me.
Yeah. So for our audience, this is very interesting. Like the mind and body connection. If you can just tell our audience who may not be aware of that, so how it affects us, as well as what are the implications of understanding what our body is telling us. So that is something uh, which can be a very insightful thing for our viewers and listeners.
Yeah. So I would definitely say I'm just learning. I'm on this journey and probably I will never learn. I think for exactly because of this certain, like I developed a coping mechanism in which I probably was more detached. Like if I wanted something from my brain, I just do it. I don't listen to my body or my needs because that's what I needed to be adaptable and successful in an environment. But when you don't do that for a long time, like I at a certain point had constantly dry eyes. That means like I would wake up in the night and I would, like, if I would have sand in my eyes, that was the feeling. Or I would have constant headaches that didn't allow me then to be at my work. And I think in Italian, or also like in different languages, we have almost like, sometimes we even have literal expressions of what that means. No, I can't see you anymore. No, or like I can't, like we have, I don't know now in English, but we sometimes have expressions that kind of tell us what the body wants us to say something, because if we are not listening, it develops certain symptoms. And so for me now, it is much more of, I much have a higher level of awareness. So for example, right now, when I start having doubts in my mind, or I'm doubting what I do or how things are going, then the first question I ask myself right now is like, are you tired? Because usually I doubt myself when I'm tired. So instead of maybe giving space to those doubts, I say, maybe get some rest and tomorrow things are different. So it's kind of, instead of following your mind and the questions and the thoughts, you like, I come back and say, what is my body doing? What does it need right now? And then if I have satisfied those needs, then usually those self-doubts are gone.
That's insightful. Yeah. So understanding, and I think it is more from that self-awareness part that we start scanning our body and what and how it impacts in the way. So yeah, I'm also reading about the embodied leadership practices. So I can understand what you are trying to convey. So thank you for sharing that. Now, coming to the next aspect is, when you look back in that early days, like you mentioned that your parents gave that, do what you enjoy doing as a North Star in your. So I think that is driving you even now as a motivational aspect. Now, similarly, what are some of the mentors or leaders in your work and organizational life who might have guided you as mentors, or people in our team who might have, and what are some of the lessons, some of the interesting stories which you might recollect, which still influence you?
I think there are various, but immediately who I think of is Cindy Gallop, who I don't know. She kind of says she is the founder of Make Love Not Porn. She had like a career in agency and then founded a company that is, which essentially, or like her mission is to end rape culture in the world. And now she does this in a way, kind of really at the forefront and driving what it could look like for a woman to actually build a business or run a business, or what is the ethos behind. And definitely they are like trailblazing or are role models for other people, because I think I didn't have anybody in my family who was an entrepreneur, and I
Hmm.
had nobody often around me that was taking on this role. Or generally, if you think about entrepreneurs or if you think about founders, you usually think about men, or that's the usual role. So for me, being a woman and starting an entrepreneurial project has been also a bit at the beginning quite strange, because when I started, it's like people are like, what's she doing? Like, it is like it was a bit like I was met not so much with support, but I felt like more skepticism, um,
Hmm.
because it is a bit like unfamiliar or uncommon, or saying yes, I'm going to do this. And so having other women who are founders and are also embracing things differently, because I feel like that there is a certain culture attached to startups, and I'm trying to think what would be a more regenerative way of leadership look like. What does a more caring aspect of leadership look like? How is my version? How do I build in rest in my list of priorities? And so it's a bit like a different type. And sometimes I also feel like there is no existing playbook. So yes, there are some leaders, but I think also there is always a big difference from what we see from the outside to what feels in the inside. And so I think often I'm now leaning into sometimes more my intuition. And so again, it's probably listening more to myself rather than looking at the outside of what others are doing and how they are approaching the things. So I think it's more like about having the self-awareness. What are my values? What is important to me? What do I want to embody, or what do I want to role model or see in the world? And then trying to make that happen. And I think it really starts more like with ourselves, and who do I need to become as a person to enable that.
Yeah, that's quite insightful. And I just like to check in with you. Like, for example, there was a situation in which where the organization where I was working was going through a merger process, and that was a very difficult transition phase for quite few of us. And there are people who are also exploring work, and there is like this trend of AI having its impact on our work in one positive way as well as also in negative way. And sometimes we are seeing people in that crossroads. What should we do in this stage? One is entering the workforce, as well as, for example, those people who may be in an uncertain situation. Like, I was having a call with a friend the other day, and he was mentioning that he was given a notice of layoff and want to move out and find what next. So, Lily, what can some of what kind of actions they might be looking on, and how can they um, find new pivots in their um, uh, work as well as career? Your thoughts in that process, because you have gone through that process. So it will be definitely
Yeah.
helpful.
I think I'm meeting a lot of people who are in transitions, and I think sometimes it's like I think there is every transition is different, and also different people have different privileges. So I feel
Mm,
also sometimes it's like one of my first questions is often also like, no, what can you do? Because some people have not the privilege, they may have like financial responsibilities, they can't maybe no do what I have done, or like taking a more like thoughtful and intentional approach and approaching even working for myself in a slow thing. They're like, I need to make this work and I need to find a way to pay my bills. So what is like for me, it's like always thinking about the options that are available and getting creative about what those could look like and what they are.
mm,
When
mm,
people want to do a bigger pivot or transition, then I'm the person that is the first person that says big pivots and transitions, they take you at least a year and they will
mm,
impact your confidence quite a lot. Because when you do a big pivot, for example, for me, it was at a certain point I was this kind of project managing, and I wanted to become a service designer. So I quit my job and went back to the university, or I quit my full-time job and started working for myself, or I stopped working for myself and started more like an entrepreneurial project. What I found in all those three transitions is that we need to have patience, and that it takes time to build up a new network, to gain the skills that you need that give you the confidence to fully embrace that transition, and to also do a little bit of experimentation to truly figure out if this is the transition that we want or if it takes us into another path. So I feel
mm.
like those pivots are never that quick. I think sometimes of how they are presented. Like in my life, I see so many, they take more time. And so that's why I'm kind of saying like, do you have that patience and that time? And can you be that uncomfortable for a little bit of also not being good at something, of not having the right connections and the network, of not having maybe the financials that kind of match? It can happen, it might also not. Or do you actually need to kind of make things work right now, and therefore you might need to take an intermediate step in between?
I just was I'm curious, like you mentioned the three stages of your pivots into different fields, and may I ask, sometimes one of the challenge which I hear when I interact with fellow members and friends is, Phoebe, I have not been to a connection building process. Can you help us? What should I do in that space? How
Yeah.
this connection building can, because sometimes I'm not aware of what to be done in that stage. So, do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts to those members who it may be really helpful for them?
Yeah, I think one is allowing yourself to be in places and opportunities that build connection. And I think the other thing, and that's probably the thing that we talk more about and that we know, because yeah, you can go, there are so many opportunities. You can connect on LinkedIn, you can and start a conversation there, you can go to networking events. But I think what is truly important is actually how do you nurture those relationships? Because just knowing a person or having a connection request doesn't lead to anything. You also like need to show up. And so a way of how I like to show up, or how I like to practice showing up, is sometimes actually, some could call it, I don't know how to call it, like I sometimes think about marketing of kindness. So it is, what could you do that makes you feel good, but also kind of nurtures that connection with that other person? I'll give you a couple of concrete examples. So within IMMA, we have a monthly reflection practice that we call Sense and Respond. And in that monthly reflection, there is a question like, who are you grateful for this month? Who kind of allowed you or celebrated you? And the task is simply sending a thank you message, of like appreciating the other person of what they did. And so I think what that does, it actually makes you feel good, by just expressing that gratitude. But it also kind of creates a better connection, or that person kind of instinctively has a stronger connection to you because they feel seen and appreciated. And I think we all have a desire and a need to be feel seen, heard, and appreciated. And so how can we kind of carve out some of the time to just do those small gestures of appreciation of things that happen to us? And I think it just then allows you to nurture relationships over longer time. And sometimes I like to ask people when I have a conversation with them, is like, how can I support you? And it's a good question because it also allows, for example, you to think, because probably that comes back of saying, what support would I need? And then I always think about what could be the tiniest request, because sometimes people ask, or like if I ask this question, they come back and they make very big requests. So it's very impossible. It's too much. Now, if they ask me, for example, yes, I'm looking for a job. Asking for a job is a very huge request. So that wouldn't be a good answer. But what would be a better answer is, do you know one person that has these characteristics? Would you be able to make an introduction? Like, knowing one person is very different than getting a person a job. And so I think also for us to learn how can we nurture relationships and how can we actually do them or also manage them over time.
That's a beautiful advice. What is that one thing which probably can get me closer to that my aspiration or my need, and what can so thank you for sharing that. And to the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to share it in the LinkedIn chat and in the comments so that we can address that. Now, I'm looking into, for example, a question is, looking back, what are you most proud of in terms of the impact you made in the industry or the community? I know the IMMA community which you have is something which you cherish. What is the story about IMMA?
Yeah, I think I can then answer the story, but I think what I'm most proud of, or it has to do with IMMA, it's really when I see people launching their solo businesses and those businesses growing over time. It's like you see, like, and then I think Ariel said this beautiful as like, you make something easier, which is incredibly hard. And what I never thought I would be able to be a solopreneur, and now I can be. And so it's allowing people to essentially make a living doing impactful work that allows me. And IMMA is the shortcut of impact makers, because I chose it the way because I met all those people that said, like, yes, I want to use my work to make an impact. This is not just about money or having a job or having working for myself. This is actually about contributing and making things better. And so, like, for me, the more I can help people make a living doing what they like and what actually moves the needle on creating a better future for us all, that's the biggest kind of thing that I'm proud of. And otherwise, I think I'm proud of just having the persistence and the consistency of continuing to go even when things are hard. And I think that just gives me a level of confidence that I can do things because I can trust myself for showing up and doing things, even if they are not easy, if they take time and patience. So, yeah. And if you want, I can answer the story behind IMMA, but
yeah, please. I like to hear that, and I think that will be the most inspiring part. In addition to what informations you have already shared, we like to hear that.
Yeah. So I think IMMA. So essentially, IMMA started. I started working for myself at the beginning as a prototype. What I mean by that is I was working in an agency in London designing those new services for those big brands or designing ventures. And I negotiated a 4-day week so that I had 1 day to test the waters and see if I would like to work for myself, because that has been a dream that I had for a long time, but I didn't have the resources or the network to kind of just say, I take the leap. I just do that. I always needed to take very calculated risks. And so I did that. And until during the pandemic, in which I it became very hard to juggle both because my freelance work was growing. And so I came to a point where I quit the job and essentially also moved back to Italy. And so I started working full time, mostly more like as what I consider as a freelancer, where you take on longer engagements and you're a bit like a temporary employee for a company. So you work 4 days on something. So I did that for almost 2 years. Sometimes I reduced it to fewer because I started with this idea of IMMA because I also realized by doing a program called IMMA Collective that nobody ever teaches us how to work for ourselves. And it's very different building a startup to building a one-person business. And so I thought, I had no clue, like all those things that we need to know, how to do sales, how to market ourselves, how to think about business model. There is not just one version, there is many different versions, and you can be very creative and intentional. And I said, I want to have a model that allows me to work from wherever I want and to stop selling my time. And so, and then, as I said, I kind of thought, okay, I want to focus really on sustainability and climate as a topic, but saying I want to work in sustainability is as vague as saying I like sport. What sport is it? And so I decided that my area is climate resilience and climate adaptation. So how do we prepare for the impacts of climate breakdown? And that's where I actually got me started thinking about how can I help people become resilient and adaptable. And that created this collective of IMMA, where essentially, as I said before, we are like a little bit of a forest connected through the roots. And I believe that if within IMMA, what I teach people is essentially how to work for themselves and how they can create a value proposition and an offering and sell it. Because I believe that in a world that is in constant disruption and in constant flux, having the skills and the ability to create something and sell it is going to be an anti-fragile strategy, because it gives you the sense of empowerment and the confidence that no matter what will come your way, you have the skills and the tools to actually create your own opportunities. And so right now it's a wonderful global community of people who have at least 10 years of experience who decided to just work for themselves as solopreneurs and solo businesses.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that impactful and extraordinary concept of IMMA and the impact makers, and that is a beautiful story which you have shared. And I know we are the time flies, and I like to ask two more questions before we close. The first one is, the world of work is constantly evolving. I'm curious how you have managed to stay adaptable and ahead of the curve in your line of work.
Yeah, I think exactly this last concept that I shared. For me, it's like learning how to take an idea or have a problem and figure out how to solve it for other people and then present it in a way that they say, yes, can I buy this from you? Like having that skill is for me the skill that I'm currently honing the most and that I'm learning the most and that I'm trying out for myself. And then what works and what doesn't work, I share it with other people, because I believe that the disruption that we're going to see, also, you mentioned it before, Phoebe, AI, probably people needing to migrate or needing to move in different places. I think it's just become so essential. And I think what allows me really is like, rather to waiting for the right opportunity to come across, I just learn how to create them. And doing it alone is very hard and requires a lot of effort. So I'm thinking, what if you really would have a principle of generous reciprocity in which you do it together with others, and you have other people look out for you and you look out for others. And I think that this is a thing that I know other cultures are have a more collective spirit, but I know I spent most of my time in Europe, which is kind of so driven by individualistic concepts, and that we unlearned the ability to be there for one another.
Yeah, preparing ahead and being in community. And I think that there is an interesting question which just came up. It is from Jason Abraham. Jason, thank you for that question. The question is, can startups can you start ups on how to create constant engagement with the community which you are creating and creating an impact in their lives?
Sorry, I feel like I didn't get the question fully. It's like,
Yeah,
is it around how to make engagement
yeah,
or?
it is more about startups. So can startups um, on I think can startup deal on how to create constant engagement, especially in the beginning, how to create a continuous engagement with the community, especially when you are starting up. I think that is what he's meaning. And with the community which you are creating, and how that can create impact on the community.
So I think that startups and solo businesses are very different things. So
Yeah.
if you think of startups, it's more like industrial agriculture. They're really kind of optimized for growth, optimized to make the most out of what it's marketing. And if you have a solo business, you can think about more this is like your garden or your food forest that sustains you and your life. So it's very different. And I think they require very different skills and different ways of thinking, because a
Mm.
startup is usually kind of, there is a certain obsession with growth because you want to have the valuation, you want to have that exit. So the way of how you approach it is very different. If you also think then the engagement and the connections, startups are all about how do you scale fast. And so what I'm building with the community is not truly like a startup, or it's not interesting for the typical VC or the funding, because they consider it not scalable. But I believe it's always about the quality of the connections within the network. So there is many
Mm.
different versions of communities. So you can have very loose networks, like communities where you go in and it feels very anonymous. And IMMA Collective is intentionally, we have a principle around quality over quantity. So we don't have that many members, because it's more about what is the quality of the connection that you can create. Because if the quality is like not that, if you don't have strong ties, then it comes back to the example that I gave before. You can have many connections like on LinkedIn, but probably they're not looking out for you, or they're not making you find a job. It can be more accidental. But having people to look after you, you need to have stronger connections and also stronger relationships. So I believe it's really about the quality of the connections.
Yeah, I think Jason, Ima, from a solopreneur perspective, focus on that connection process and highlighted, like when it is a startup, the playground is much bigger compared to what we have in a solopreneurship. I hope that information and thoughts from Lilli will be helpful for you. Thanks for that question. And I know we we are this is interesting discussion, and I just want to close with this final question to you, Lilli. One is, what is one thing you wish you knew earlier in your career when you reflect back?
Yeah. I think, well, yeah, there are many things. Maybe it's probably not the best thing, but one of the first things that just come to my mind. I sometimes think that we often think about when we get to a point, things will get easier. But actually, somebody said us like, depending on the business or like personally, if you're growing, it's hard. If you're like stagnating, it's hard. If you're like declining or whatever you do, it's hard. So I think there is a part of our human condition that makes things hard, but it's not about like, we can always see the positive things. I can think I became very resilient, in which I don't take hard things or negative things and make them big. We can intentionally choose where to put our attention towards. And that it's that we can't often control what happens to us, but we can definitely control how we react to the things and how we process them and the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the stories that we tell ourselves have more power in our regular interactions. And yeah, and Jason, I have just mentioned that you are absolutely on the point and highlighting quality over quantity. Thank you, Jason, for your thoughts and comments. And Lilli, thank you for your time. And it was an interesting and engaging conversation, sharing your experiences, your journey, the story of IMMA, Impact Makers. Thank you for accepting my invite and being with me today in this conversation.
Thank you for having me and for those thoughtful questions. I truly enjoyed it. I always learn a lot about myself, and thank you for bringing this into the world.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned. We will catch up with another guest.